Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me, and thank you for that very well chosen 100K. As you were reading it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, God is telling me something. I wish He told me that yesterday when I was thinking about today's presentation. So it just goes to show you can always learn something. Anyway, thank you for coming this evening. It's a great joy to be able to share with you about witnessing, because I know that there are quite many languages going on. I am going to share a little slideshow that I've made, but um, hopefully that won't distract you too much. So I've chosen as my title, What I Learned Through Witnessing. Can you all see that? Can you give me a thumbs up if it's working correctly? Thank you, Artem. So, yes, let me get started. I mean, first of all, this is what I'm hoping to talk about with you this evening. The first point is I have to be honest and explain that I'm not, in fact, a champion witnesser or even perhaps a good example at all. I want to share a little bit about how I was witnessed because I think that's important, and it makes a difference for your whole spiritual life, what attracted you, what didn't. And to talk a little bit about what worked and what didn't there, I'd like to share with you three case studies of witnessing to different spiritual children. Not the only spiritual children, of course, but three that have stayed in my mind. I'd like to share with you a little experience of witnessing in Las Vegas with True Mother and about witnessing today. And finally, maybe as a conclusion, how important it is to work as a team and leave some kind of mark that shows what you did. So, as I said, I'm not myself a very good example. I see many people on this call who are much better at witnessing than I am, and I praise God for that. But sometimes I think you might agree that we can actually learn more from a person, and I'm talking about myself, of course, from their weaknesses and struggles, as well as their strengths and experiences. I know myself when somebody shares a real testimony that includes going over difficulty and struggling and maybe succeeding or even just living to fight another day. Sometimes that's um, more exciting than the testimony of someone who seems to have the world at their feet. Everything goes their way. There's no problems. Actually, Father mentioned that in the 100K just now, didn't he? That um, it's all right. So Father said in the 100K, just earlier in the 100K we just read, do not be concerned that you are not good in witnessing. It is all right to not bring people into the unification church. You should make the impression on the people so they will say about you in their hearts, these people are good people. Do you understand? They should be able to testify. These people do not like to be indebted to others. If you give them once, they will return it multiple times. No one dislikes this type of people. Yeah, of course, I don't think that Father really meant never worry about bringing people into the church. And I'm grateful that he didn't, because otherwise I wouldn't be here and most of you wouldn't be here either. But I think Father's point is very well taken, that if that's all we're worried about, making members, having people join, um, it will be very clear in our general posture and demeanor that we are looking out for our own selves rather than being concerned about the people we meet. I mean, here in London, where I live, I'm just a few hundred meters from a pedestrian street. And on a typical day, there's at least 5 or 6 different kinds of groups witnessing. There's usually 2 or 3 churches. There's often a Muslim group. But all of them, it's very transparent that they're really there for themselves, I'm afraid to say, which is why most people, including me, tend not to stop or even speed up a bit because we kind of already know what it is that they're going to say. So, Father's point, I think my first point as well, is the most important thing is inside, that we're not going out with the desperate mind. I'll talk about that later, but rather because we know that God is looking for his children. Anyway, let's move on. So how was Eyewitness? There I am at the age of 18 when I joined the church in California in 1976. Please do not do the math and calculate that I'm almost 70. But the fact is, witnessing was all our church did at that time. And I didn't know it, of course, but they had a system and a target, and I fit the profile. So what was the profile? Young, not too weird, and actually, everybody wore their hair long in those days, and carrying a backpack. That was also very important. And our witnessing teams used to witness outside the bus station early in the morning when the long distance buses were coming in from New York or Chicago, because they knew that on those buses there would be young, hungry people who would probably do almost anything to have a free breakfast. I know it sounds a little bit cynical, but that's the reality. And I myself met the church the very day that I arrived in San Francisco. So the system was good, and it was very organized and very reliable. After I joined, the only thing we did every day was to witness. Well, not quite the only thing, because we prayed a lot and we fasted a lot. We didn't eat anything until noon every day. And we were confident. We were confident because we knew that if we went out, we would meet people. And every night, we would invite people to a dinner program. There'd be dinner, there'd be a short talk, and there would be a van waiting outside. And a 2-day workshop started almost every day. So that was how good it was, that people would come every day and all the time. And at weekends, we often had 100 or more new guests on a 2-day workshop. Well, how did all that work out? For years, it was the model, perhaps the only model of successful witnessing in America. But there was a problem, and that was that many or most of the people who joined eventually picked up their backpack again and kept moving, including my own spiritual parent and many, honestly, of the people that I met at that time. So thinking back, I realized that it's not enough to just look for people who are seeking for spiritual truth, because some people will be seeking their whole life, flitting on from one thing to another. What we need is people who want to find. The search isn't everything, but actually they want to find the result. 20 years later, when I went back to San Francisco as the CARP leader, I tried the same approach that we had done, but it just wasn't right. The time had changed. And in any case, we had this reality that so many kept on moving. I hope that in their lives, even today, they've received a blessing from God, that what they learned through the principle has given them some spiritual foundation in life. But at the same time, of course, they're not participating in the providence of God. And as you know from True Mother, in her recent speech in Munich, we need those kind of people now. So, second thing I want to talk about is witnessing in London. That's another time of my life that really is indelibly carved into my brain. Once upon a time, we rented a tiny video center in London. Here it is. And many people, including myself, to be honest, said, this is way too expensive. Why do we need a witnessing center? We already have Lancaster Gate, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, it was the right location. And in the end, that's all that counted. You might think, well, that looks like a pretty nice witnessing center. And of course it was. But in reality, we didn't own that big, nice window there. We just had this little side door and these 3 windows upstairs. That was the whole place. And it cost some astronomical sum of money. In today's money, it would be about 15,000 euros a month or something like that. So we were all keen. We were proud of our new video center. And I felt myself, I should show an example. So I tried to witness all day, every day. And for 21 days, I got no results at all. Why? She reminded me a bit later on of True Father going out tuna fishing. Eventually, True Father became a champion tuna fisher, as I think you know. But in his first 21 days, he didn't catch a single tuna. while other people were doing quite well. Well, it wasn't a question of there being enough people. This is kind of looking out on the Charing Cross Road, where that video center was. There were plenty of people all the time, all day long. So it wasn't the fact, the video center had no problem. It was beautiful. There were enough people. So I had to consider it's me. So I changed my strategy. I thought, okay, instead of going out every day to witness, and I'm sorry to those of you who are witnessing leaders, I decided, you know what? I'm only going to go for 2 hours a day after work is over. At that time, I was working in the jewelry business. And so I would finish work and I'd go downtown. And as on the way, I told myself, somehow I have to be desperate, but I shouldn't look desperate because, as you know, if somebody desperate comes up to you on the street, you just want to run away. So you have to look casual. And I trained myself to be able to tell people why I was there. After work, I wanted to share with you something special that's made a difference in my life and helped me to meet God. It helped actually to be able to tell people, yeah, I have a job, I have other things to do, but for a couple of hours in the day, at the end of the day, I'm coming here to share something with you. And, so I thought I was doing well. I promised myself I'll keep going. I won't stop until the set time. But then one day I just it wasn't working. And I just decided I have to go on. I have to stay here until I meet somebody. And that brought me a wonderful spiritual child. She was walking down the street just before midnight. And I remember my first encounter with her because at those days we had a fairly simple approach. We asked people, are you interested in God? She said, no, absolutely not. Are you interested in philosophy? No. Would you like a cup of coffee? No. Are you interested in Oriental philosophy? And by that time, she'd already walked past and I'd almost given up, but she stopped in her tracks. She said, what did you say? And it turned out that she was studying Chinese. So from there, it was a short journey from Chinese to Korean. But I had to fight all the way. I mean, getting her into the video center was a fight, and it was late at night. Every lecture she watched was a fight with 1,000 objections. Every workshop she went, she wanted to run away and leave. And soon after she joined full-time, she said, well, I'm coming back, but I have to go and pick up some luggage and tell my parents what's going on in my hometown in the Alps. And she left. And she didn't come back when she said. But I decided I'm not going to give up that easy. So I borrowed a car and I drove 1,000 kilometers to find her, thinking I'm going to have to argue and fight. And it was such a miserable journey down. But when I got there, she said, look, let me handle this. And then in my presence, she explained to her parents what she was going to do, why she was going to do it. And I realized, I can only do so much. In the end, she herself has to be persuaded this is the course for me. So I drove back with a very light heart because I knew she'd turned the corner. Another case study, a person that it wasn't even the main target. I was actually trying to witness to someone else who'd been the prime minister of a country. And they were too busy. They said, look, I don't have time for this, but why don't you try this other person? And this young man was a neo-communist. He was full of argument, full of impatience. And I remember he had so many questions. And here's the thing, I thought that I knew the answers. But time and again, God told me, don't answer the question. Don't show how smart you are or how clever you are or how clever you think you are. He has to find the answers for himself. And eventually he did. He joined. He's now one of our major pastors in the UK. And sometimes another case study is you really have to be decisive, because what I found is that, of course, God wants you to meet people, But actually, sometimes Satan wants you to meet people too. Only Satan wants you to meet the wrong people, the ones who will take up a lot of time, look like they're very promising, and eventually drain you of your life energy. I remember we had a carb center, and there was a young second generation girl who moved in um, and joined our activities. But after a while, she went back to her home, far away in the UK. And eventually, we got round to visiting her. I remember going to her house, and she told us, "Well, look, it's really nice of you to come, but I have a boyfriend." I mean, that was pretty unheard of in those days. And I don't think I can leave him. So anyway, somehow the spirit world worked, and we told her, if you stay here, you will die. But if you pack your bags in 10 minutes and come back with us, you will live. A bit like that thing in Terminator, right? Come with me if you want to live. But it worked. It worked. And so she packed her bags, she jumped in the van, she drove back down, she became a dedicated member. She's now leading some of the Blessed Family operations in America. So, these are just case studies. I don't know that there's really more I can say, except to say that witnessing is a fight, as Father said in the Hundake that we just read. And if you don't want to fight, you will not succeed in witnessing. It's okay to fight. You have to fight with yourself, but also you have to fight for the people, because we're taking them away from Satan, who has owned them through the lineage for a long, long time. Fast forward then, a few years ago, True Mother, who at the time often came to Las Vegas, this was after Father passed, who was really fed up with the slow progress we're making. It seems to be a constant theme, right? But in this particular case, she was fed up that we were slow in training new leaders, because even then she knew we're getting old, we need new people. So without much discussion or consultation, even with them, she suddenly appointed two young vice presidents in America, and she decided to train them herself. This was around Christmas time. So she called them, and they both had young families, to come from New York at Christmas time to witness in Las Vegas, because I'm not quite sure, but there were a number of international visitors in town, and everybody went out witnessing together. And I was the president of the American Church at the time, but as usual, I was not very spiritually intuitive, and I was getting ready for the midnight prayer on New Year's Eve, and suddenly God showed up and told me, "What the heck are you doing here in New York? You need to be in Las Vegas with True Mother witnessing." So early the next morning, I flew to Las Vegas, and it shows my age. Maybe most of you don't know that TV show, The Walking Dead. It's about zombies. But point is, New Year's morning in Las Vegas, after an evening of partying and everything else, it's bizarre. There's nobody on the streets, and those that are seem to be in a state of, complete, confusion. Or I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. Okay, mother's mother, but New Year's morning in Las Vegas, who are we possibly going to meet? But the fact is, there were some people there. Here's one of the spiritual children from that time. And we decided, look, we're not going to succeed here with regular approaches. So we'll have to be outrageous. So I think for this particular guy, we walked up and said, "Excuse me, you look like one of those wanted terrorists that the FBI poster." And he was shocked out of his mind, of course, because, actually he wasn't a terrorist. He was a student from Iran. Then a few other people like that. Remember, Father once said, if you want to witness to someone, go in a restaurant and eat their hamburger. Well, we didn't do that, but we just decided for a day or two, let's have completely no inhibitions. And when we actually met True Mother, the very first thing she asked us is, "So did you go witnessing? Did you get any guests? Did you teach them?" And it was such a relief to be able to say, "Yes, Mother, we did. And we got some results as well." Father also taught me many things about witnessing. And one thing I remember him saying is, you only fish where there are fish. So if you've ever fished with true parents, or indeed with anybody, you'll know that usually you can have a good idea where the fish might be, but they're not always there. You might have a good spot, and most days it goes really well, but then they move. And if you just stay there in the same spot thinking, I'm going to stick it out until the fish come back, you will never succeed. So Father himself was really like that. He was an absolute expert fisherman, but he did it. He said, I try to feel like the fish feel. I try to think, what are the fish looking for? And they feel that vibration even down my fishing line. So I thought, okay, let's try this with people. What do they really want? They may look busy, they may look preoccupied, but actually, in our original nature, everybody has a desire to be happy. That's what the divine principle says. And of course, to meet God. So, understanding how true parents would approach a problem of witnessing is really an important point. And I remember this day because earlier, we'd had a meeting with Father at the breakfast table. It was a meeting for carp, and Father was just so disappointed at our low results, he was so disappointed. I remember he was pounding the table at breakfast so hard that cups and forks and knives were jumping off the table onto the floor, which, is pretty unusual. And at the end of breakfast, Father stood up and sort of said something like, well, I don't want to see you. This is over. So I remember 2 or 3 of us, people in this picture, we went outside. We knew that Father would probably go fishing. And, you can imagine as we stood in the driveway, we looked like a bunch of beaten dogs, to be honest, tails drooping between our legs, hardly daring to look up from the ground. And a few minutes later, Father came by in his car, sort of bowed, He went about 4 meters past, and then suddenly the car started rolling back and the window wound down, and Father said, look, forget what I said at breakfast. Let's go fishing. And so, we had actually a wonderful day with True Father. And I realized that, the same with True Mother, when they scold us or give us a strong, guidance, they're really also speaking to themselves. Mother said when she came to Europe this time, how can you be proud of 50 years in Europe producing such a limited result? And it's true, we can't be proud of it. But at the same time, of course, true parents are not proud of themselves either, because ultimately that's their responsibility. So how precious it is actually if our parents can really treat us like the mature children we're supposed to be and share their whole heart. That's much better than getting some sort of, feel-good story. I'm coming perhaps to a few more points. I want to talk a little bit about some hometown witnessing that we did in Japan. I mean, Fumiko, my wife, is amazingly consistent. She came to the UK in 1982, or 1981, actually, and we were matched in Camberg. And, she's actually been out of Japan ever since. That's a long time, right? Almost 50 years, 40 years plus. But she really took a lot of effort to write to all her relatives and friends back in Japan, to send them greetings, to give them news of, what was going on. And they never wrote back. They never responded. But she didn't give up. And then we decided, look, we have to go and see them before they die, before we die. And at that time, there was a big emphasis on blessing people, giving them the holy wine. So we decided just to go for it. And here was our mobile blessing kit, various juices, all of course with holy wine in them. There was nothing wine-like in Japan. And anyway, grape juice is not that popular there. So we got it cold and good. And we just decided, we're going to go for it. We're not going to make any appointments. And when we meet people, we're going to move, straight to what we want to accomplish. And actually, we didn't give people much chance to say no. The woman on the left here is an aunt of Fumiko's. And we just went to her house unannounced. She just lost her husband, actually, tragically. But Fumiko said, well, we came here to give you a blessing. And, right away, we brought out the holy wine and we did the blessing. And then afterwards, with that out of the way, we had a chance to witness. It was so much better than trying to witness first and then finish the meeting with a blessing. Because if you do it that way around, tension builds up, right? You just think, are they going to say yes? Is it going to happen? And I might be wasting my, if you get it done right away, you can explain later. Father used to tell us in America, Adam and Eve fell in ignorance. In fact, they didn't really even knew they'd fallen for a long time. And Satan manipulated it so that they wouldn't find out. The family on the right is also an interesting story. This is one of Kumiko's cousins and his wife, and they're farmers, of course. And when we went there and said, we want to give you a blessing from God, he said, oh, I better change my shirt. I don't think he's worn a white dress shirt in 40 years. But anyway, he went upstairs and he came back with this white dress shirt on, and we gave them the holy wine. We shared with them about what was going on. And interestingly, after that, the other relatives that Fumiko had never had a response for started to get in touch. And they said, we want that blessing. Why didn't you visit our house? Actually, in some cases we did visit and they weren't home. So, what looked like a hopeless situation turned into a real change of heart for so many, many people. But the bottom line of it was just realizing, we're thinking about this too much. If we want to bless our relatives and tell them about true parents, we'll just go and do it. We won't stand on social nicety or protocol. And it really, I have to say, it really was wonderful. But, and I'm talking more about those days when we were becoming jumbo couples. The fact is, even though we already had maybe 300 blessed couples around the world, we just couldn't see any way to reach 430 or to have couples who would commit themselves to 40-day separation, 3-day ceremony, and so forth. And one time I was in Zimbabwe with True Mother, and I just kind of reached the point where I kind of broke down in front of God, and I said, God, I don't see any way I can accomplish this goal. And God answered, well, why aren't you asking for help? Why are you trying to do this by yourself? So at that time, the continental leader of Africa was there. I was in Europe by that time. And I said, I really need help to finish off this tribal Messiah activity. I said, what about Nigeria? I was born in Nigeria. I was educated in Nigeria. That's my country. Is it possible for me to contribute to the tribal Messiah work in Nigeria? And he said, yeah, of course. Why didn't you ask before? So this is a picture in our home tribal Messiah area. Actually, that day, there were about 1,200 people who came out. More than 400 couples had already been blessed, but to our surprise on that day, another 80 couples had prepared themselves to receive the blessing. So we could do the holy wine, and use the indemnity stick ceremony. And a lot of people testified as to what a difference this had already made in their lives, especially the women. And I remember the chief of this tribe saying, this is wonderful because the main problem in our community is that the men are not being responsible fathers or husbands. But this is changing it, and it's a new start. I have many other pictures of this day. Some of the people near the front are pastors and so forth. But the key point was, if you need help, whether it's in witnessing, tribal messiahship, we have to ask for it and be ready to receive it gracefully. But I'm not very good at that. I kind of feel, I'm the boss. I have to do it all by myself. And it's totally false. But having done it, then of course you really have to pass it on. So after we went to Korea and reported to True Mother, we came back determined to help other couples go through the same course. Some we gave money, some we gave encouragement. To everybody, we tried to give hope. And maybe more than 12 couples here in the UK decided we can do it. Actually, what we contributed was very small, but somehow it just takes one person to kind of set the example, and others can follow. I think it's very important to avoid excuses. A lot of what I've said so far this evening has been about, the right location, the right place, having the right materials. And of course, it's always good to have those things with you. If you're out and you meet someone and you don't have at least a business card or a pamphlet, you often feel, oh gosh, I missed an opportunity there. But actually, you also have to be able to witness with nothing. I have a spiritual son in Korea I met in the sauna during a UPF conference. And in a Korean sauna, I think most of you have been in one. You have nothing, right? Just a towel, which you don't wear. You sit on it. So, you're completely naked. You have nothing. And how can you witness like that? Well, in fact, you can, because this university professor was there. He said, you must be one of those unification people visiting. What's it all about? And of course, I was actually tempted to sort of pretend I couldn't understand him, or, go to the other sauna. But instead, we started talking. And this happened 2 or 3 times over the course of a week. And I later found out that he joined and was coming to church. So I thought, well, that's a lesson, isn't it? God is the one doing the work here. And we can never say we don't have the resources or the materials, or it's not true. It's God doing the work. We just need to try to not make excuses. I also want to suggest to you to make tools that others can use. A long time ago now, for example, I made a series of short Divine Principle videos, just 20 to 30 minutes long. It was back long before PowerPoint or, all the resources we have today. But anyway, together with help from some of the video team in London, I made several short videos, and I didn't forget about them. Actually, over the last year, so many people told me, well, actually, you're the first person I learned the principle from. So, I'm nothing special. I would encourage all of you to consider making a contribution to the field. When I was studying at UTS, as you study more and more advanced degrees, in the beginning, you're expected to know what everybody else knows. And then as you move up to the master's level, you're supposed, of course, to have some kind of mastery of the content. But when you study for your PhD, as many of you have done, you're expected to bring something new to the field. You have to have something original, something different. So it's important to develop tools that other people can use. But of course, that's just one example. But another thing I'd like to recommend to you is, why don't you write about what you're doing? This picture here on the left is just as we started the 40-day Holy Ground tour in America. This was back in 2014. And we were desperate to break through in witnessing. And one thing that came to my mind was, we shouldn't forget the original foundation that True Father made here in America. In 1965, he came and he traveled the whole country. And as you know, he created holy grounds in every state. But in reality, after Father himself came to America, many of those holy grounds became somewhat neglected. In a few cases, people could hardly remember where they were. In one notable case in Lincoln, Nebraska, the holy ground, which was in a park near the zoo, well, the zoo expanded and the holy tree is now in the monkey enclosure. So only the monkeys can visit the holy ground, and the pilgrims have to sort of watch through the fence. Anyway, I wrote a series of articles about it, and to my great surprise, the Washington Post picked up the one right even before the tour starts. This is in California, and published it throughout the country because they were interested. Yeah, how is that unification movement doing after True Father passed away? Can it survive? Will it go on? So, I think we shouldn't hide our light under a bushel, and it doesn't mean you write about it after you succeed. It's actually perhaps more interesting if you share about what you're doing right now. You never know. Somebody may read it and feel, I would like to help that. But in general, I don't think we do enough to share with the general public what we're doing, why we're doing it. We have to write about it. We have to, blog about it. We have to do anything we can to tell people what we're doing, because what are we doing? We're trying to fulfill the dream of God. There's nothing shameful about that. It's a very inspiring vision. But I just think that we could do more to share it. So, yeah, thank you for listening. I just have one more thing to say. As many of you know, last month I was with True Mother a lot. And I'll just stop sharing here. And one of the main reasons Mother came to Europe this time was to visit this art display by Alphonse Mucha called the Slav Epic. So this is a series of 20 incredibly large paintings talking about the history of the Slav people from about the 5th century until the early 20th century. And it covers everything. It covers the religious history, including, of course, the arrival of Kirill and Methodius, who came from Greece to share the Bible in the Slavic language and became the first missionaries. It talks about the many wars, the good kings and the bad kings, the suffering of the Slav people, and their victories as well. Another feature is that many of his pictures include the spirit world. So, for example, this one here, which shows the physical world and the spirit world. So it's really a kind of interesting display. And True Mother said, I learned about this from a documentary that I watched in Korea, and I felt I have to see it in person. Why? Because, True Mother is very realistic. She knows that for most people in the world, religion, theology, doctrine, it's not really that interesting, right? What's more interesting to ordinary people is sports. Of course, the Euros are about to start, and every stadium will be full of people. Nobody will have to witness to them to go there. They'll pay big money to go there for themselves. But also films, art. Mother's interesting how, as Father was before her, how do we harness these things so that the things people naturally want to do can bring them close to God? When you go to the Chanwanggung, which I believe you will next year, all of you, you'll see, for example, in the Channel Sanctum, there are a series of 20 paintings, actually the same number, interestingly, not quite as big as these Alphonse Mucha ones, but actually more beautiful, in which True Mother attempts to tell the story of Christianity, Korea, and True Parents in a very simple, quick way. So I think there are many opportunities to explore how to use art, culture, today's art and culture, in new ways to share the good news of True Parents coming. And that's witnessing too. Not all of us are great about going out on the street and stopping people and say, hey, come with me. But there are so many other things that need to be done, right? We have to have good content. We have to share it in a contemporary way. We can't just follow what's going on in Korea. We have to come up with our own interpretation and make it better. This is the key point when, we talk about being an owner of Chanoguk, which in our case, we do every single day when we recite the pledge. But, an owner of Chanoguk means that we're taking responsibility to tackle problems, to make them better, to find solutions, not just to sit back and wait for somebody else to do it for us. Yeah, I think maybe I will have to stop there because basically the time is up. I was asked for 40 minutes. I've gone a little bit over time. I just want to conclude, though, by saying that True Mother came to Munich with a lot of questions about how things were going, how they could be improved. But by the time she left, she changed completely because she was so inspired by you, brothers and sisters, by those of you who were there, particularly the young people who organized everything and worked so hard. And she noticed how young people were taking responsibility. She noticed how the different generations were all there together. She was very inspired by the young children who behaved so beautifully, with a lot of help, of course. Every part of it delighted her. And on the last day, when we were having a little victory celebration, she said, "Oh, I want to come again." The first day she came, she said, "This is my last visit to Europe, so it better be good." But by the end, she was saying, "No, I definitely want to come back because what I've seen has really been inspiring." I think most of you have seen the reports on uh, global HJ News this week and last week, which really covered very well the things that we did together in Munich. Usually, Peace TV ignores us in Europe, I think, but anyway, this time they really covered it well. So if you haven't seen it, please watch it. We are working now on making a summary, some short reels for YouTube so that we really have something to be proud of. And that's why, we have created these posters and postcards because they look great. And when we're meeting people, often we're meeting them one-on-one or in a community where there are not so many members. So I personally think it's important to be able to say, this is what we're doing here in Europe. These are our goals. And I believe that the golden age is not in the past. It's ahead of us, actually. That's what your mother is saying. The time of heavenly fortune has come. So thank you very much. And back to you, Paulina.